Hello, welcome everybody. This is Jack Miller, the president and CEO of T360, welcoming you to a trends update webinar that we are doing in advance of the release of our Swanepoel Trends Report, now in its 20th edition. I have with me Paul Hagey, the editor-in-chief of the report, and our lead researcher on the topic today. So if that's the webinar you signed up for, you're in the right place. So Paul, great to have you back again. I know we've got people coming in now, and we'll give them a few minutes to come in, and then we'll
Yeah,
jump in. Tell
good
us,
to be with
tell us a
you
little bit
again.
about what we're going to do today.
Well, first and foremost, we should say that the digital report is now available live. It's live on t3trends.com. So if you purchase it, you can access it there now digitally. And if you want to purchase it, you can still get pre-order pricing through today. And it's a great opportunity. So today we're going to talk about our two top trends, Jack, which they're kind of complementary. They're very complementary of each other. One is kind of analyzing some of the recommendations we have to how to win in the post-settlement world of real estate. And then the other side is kind of analyzing some of the things yet to come as far as scrutiny related to the DOJ and some of the lawsuits outstanding. And we're going to weave those together in our conversation today. I think give people a good understanding of not only what to do, but also to kind of prepare for what may be coming.
Yeah, that's right, Paul. And I think, for those of us that there's a group that I know that comes to all of our stuff. And so
Hmm.
if you're part of that group, we do have there's some fresh material and thinking in the trends report. I know we've talked about the settlement a lot and that we've given
Yes.
workshops and resources and materials, all kinds of stuff. We've got a few new things that are in the trends report that we are releasing, which is we reached out and got some kind of both sentiment and actual what's happening in practice. And I know that that's an ongoing conversation about the practice changes. And then the other piece is not to take our eye off the ball and understand what else is coming, because there are some other anticipated DOJ, anticipated uh, court cases and settlement potential. There's more happening in this domain. We're not done. I'm
Mhm.
also anticipating today maybe people may have questions about, does the election impact any of these,
It
Paul?
definitely does.
Yeah, it definitely might. If there's a significant
I,
change in leadership over at DOJ, we
yeah.
might see some pressure change there. But so I see we've got a good group on. I'm going to go ahead and get started. As you know, T360 likes to be on time, so we'll get it kicked off. So Paul, tell us about what we're going to
Yes.
talk about today.
So we're going to talk about the top two trends. The report this year, we basically outlined this at the beginning, top of the call, winning strategies for a post-settlement world. And that's kind of more practice, more detailed than practice. And then we have an overview of some of the DOJ and legal scrutiny that's still pending in the industry. And it's just a good overview of some things that, and Jack, you mentioned, I think leaders that have engaged with T360 have heard us talk about some of these things. What makes the Trends Report valuable is that we've really polished and distilled them, and you get the book and you can really digest them. And it's been we poured over the thinking on this, so it's a refined set of analysis and information for you to kind of strategize for the year to come. So that's the
That's
value there. And if you want to see the full list of the trends, you go to t3trends.com. You can also purchase now, still pre-order pricing at the website. And this is the last day we'll get pre-order pricing. The digital report is now live there. So that's
It's great. All right, well, let's jump
pull it
in.
up if you want. Okay.
As we've said on most of the calls and Zooms regarding this topic, where we have brokers from different firms all on one call, we're not going to discuss fees or commissions. That's not the purpose of today. So again, those of you that have been in these before know that that's just the state of affairs. So what we have in the trends report this year is we've distilled all of the talks and presentations and what we've learned in buyer brokerage consultations over the last year and a half, where we've helped brokers rework their buyer broker approach and agreements and all of that into a single chapter, which we have called the Trend One. And this is our strategy chapter for how to win in a post settlement world. So we'll talk about we've got a few topics out of that are selected from the chapter for today.
Yeah.
Principally, we're talking about moving from this world, the old way, into the new way. And Paul, you had a comment?
I was just gonna say this one. This is probably one of the most. I know people have probably seen this if they've engaged with us before, but this is an essential. This old way, new way diagram that I think was born in a hotel lobby bar in Albany.
It
Jack,
was.
the first
It was
iteration.
a yeah, it was a drawn on a napkin. I think the week after the settlement was announced, if I'm
Yeah,
remembering correctly. So it was very, very close to settlement time. So so yeah, so this is the way that we've all have known, and that is now we have termed the old way, where you had a guaranteed compensation offer in the MLS. That compensation offer could be for any number. For the most part, it could be $1, it could be 1 cent, it could be nothing in some MLSs where that was allowed. But where primarily the compensation offer was coming through the guarantee in the MLS, and we've now moved to this new way, which we also call the consumer to consumer model, or the fully decoupled model, where the compensation is negotiated in advance with the buyer and their buyer broker, and much like the listing broker, how they've negotiated theirs in advance, and where the compensation is paid directly or via a contractual concession or direct payment from the seller to the buyer's
and
broker.
and I think the simplicity and clarity of this diagram, it kind of flows through the practice changes in the
It does.
strategies that are embedded in the chapter. You can see that, and this is a recommendation that T360 is coming down on, of like there's still possibility to do broker to broker compensation, but we're saying it's much clearer and everybody wins it, all sides if we move on from that. So you can see this is just the MLS is not involved, the broker to broker, they can still negotiate, but we're saying this is the way forward.
Yeah. And I know many of you have seen versions of these diagrams before. The MLS is not on this version of the diagram simply because it's not a mechanism, principally for compensation. And so we've taken it out. It still exists, obviously. It's still an important marketing tool, obviously, but not included on this diagram. Again, we've taken a position that the negotiation of compensation between the independent principals and their clients and their principal, or the brokers and their principals, is the right way. It is what is easily defensible in practice, both from lawsuits and from DOJ intervention. So that's why we've taken that.
But
We
you've
put that.
also mentioned
Yes,
there's another reason of it just makes everything much clearer to both
it does.
sides, to the
It does.
seller and the seller's agent and the buyer and the buyer's agent. And I think you coach this really well in some of the presentations you've given is
Yeah.
that agents, if they're good, even buyer's agents, if they're good, they're just negotiating on their value, presenting their value directly to the
And
consumer they're
and
providing services to.
we have also seen, and I was with Tom Ferry maybe 2 weeks ago. I recorded a podcast with him. He surveyed his audience, and I've got some survey results from ours independently, and found that a lot of his audience, which is mostly the agents and teams that work directly with Tom, that their audience, they've actually seen many agents that work principally with buyers. Their effective compensation has gone up because they've secured it on the front end. And so it's not doom and gloom. If you're skilled, you can make more money. Part of this chapter, we cover a survey that we ran in August after the settlement. These are a few of the interesting results. So we did ask brokers and agents in our database to talk about how buyer brokerage is being compensated post settlement. And it roughly worked out to be a third, a third, a third. There's slight percentage differences there, but they're not super meaningful. A third of people are primarily using broker to broker compensation. So what we refer to as the old way, where there is an offer of compensation between the brokers that is executed by a separate agreement. It's not guaranteed to the MLS anymore, so you have to sign something separately for that. Second is that there's a seller concession used to compensate the buyer's agent. A third said that's what we're doing, and the third said we're doing a mixture of both in
And
our
this was fielded pretty hot off the heels of the
What?
changes, and so we have plans to do some update surveys. It'll be interesting to see how this changes over time,
Yeah,
and we
yeah,
anticipate it will.
Yeah, I think we want to resurvey at the beginning of the year and see where people are. What I've seen in our conversations with clients is there's still a fairly significant number of transactions are being done where there is a broker to broker compensation element where the listing broker is offering something and a separate agreement or separate material is signed with the transaction that guarantees the broker to broker compensation. So that's what we're seeing, but we're going to re-instrument again and find out where we are. This was also, we asked people about how conversations were going regarding agent compensation. So listing conversations, almost half said that those conversations were basically the same. They said not really a big change. 40%, almost 40% said conversations a little more difficult because sellers now have in their mind like, oh, I don't have to pay for anything, and I'm not going to contribute towards the buyer agent.
And part of the chapter, Jack, is you provide some strategies and circumstances in which how to evaluate how to
Yep.
how to strategize concessions or marketing concessions.
That's right.
It's a more sophisticated conversation with sellers.
It is. It's a more sophisticated conversation. It's a conversation where I think you can distinguish yourself from other agents that haven't adopted the new way. And we've got some language that we'll talk about today, and it's also in the chapter. If you need language for talking to sellers, it's in the Trends Report. It's all there.
Yes.
And a few of
That's
it we'll
great.
give today. This is the last one we did. I think we surveyed on 10 questions. These were three that we picked out that we thought were interesting to discuss today. So this was on the buy side, asking about the difficulty of securing buyer agreements. So 41% said they were securing buyer agreements easily. Almost half said there were some challenges in securing buyer agreements. I mean, some of that, keep in mind, this survey was done, less than a month after the
Jack,
August 17th date.
what would you say would be the results when we do the survey or next year? How do you think this might change?
Yeah, I think that the people are learning how to do this. They're learning how to ask for the agreements up front. And I would have been shocked if we had everybody saying, oh, it's easy street and I know how to do it. I'm getting people to sign it, because we were still learning how to talk about it. Some companies, some franchises, some brands had spent more time investing in that conversation. Others were waiting until the very last minute before they changed anything, hoping that there would be some kind of intervention, some sort of intervention or some sort of change that would mean they didn't have to do it. But
so you think this settles on about like 20% ish?
I think we will still have some agents that struggle to get buyer agreements signed because they've not invested in how they explain their services to their clients, and that eventually those people will matriculate out of the business and find other work.
And I think that's part of the beauty of the new way, the simplicity and clarity. Because if you want to work it the other way, and there's so many caveats, it's just not clear and it gets very confusing to probably everybody involved, which is to your point. It's like you can explain it very simply and clearly.
Yep. I think those that are good at explaining what they do, the services they offer, how much time they spend with clients, how they help their clients get the property they want, how they save their clients money, are not going to have challenges getting these agreements signed as they become even better and better at that skill set. And by the way, we interviewed a number of people who are already good at this. We have a really fantastic interview with Ashley Jackson here in Austin. So the former president of the Austin Board of Realtors. And there's others. Alyssa Essig over at Tom Ferry's organization has given some great interviews. Once people are comfortable with this conversation, they just pull away from the pack. So, so those are just a few of the trends. We got a few more survey questions that we covered in the chapter and in the report. In really a core part of this first trend is, what do you need to do to be successful, and how do you need to move into this new way of doing business? And so we have guidance for that. There's some operating principles that
these principles, number 1 and number 4, I think stand out to me when you give them. It just cuts it through so succinctly and dynamically. I mean, I think if you elaborate on those two in particular.
Yeah, I'll talk about the principles, and we've got good language in the chapter for educating your agents. Principle number one is both buyer and sellers should not try to read the minds, and the buyers and sellers agents should not try to read the minds of the other side. We don't know, as a listing agent, we don't know what deal the buyer and their agent worked out. They could have worked out a deal to, like, hey, the buyer found the house. They just want the agent to write the contract for them. That agent is just going to charge them a flat fee. And in that instance, that's a great buyer for your seller, because they're at greatly reduced cost. They may not ask for a lot in way of concessions or buyer compensation. So if you do read their minds and you tell your seller, oh, I'm trying to read the minds of the whole market, you need to set your percentage that you're going to offer at this. You're disadvantaging your seller. And that's the principle there. Same thing on the buyer agent side. The thing we've seen online again and again, still seeing it in Facebook groups, although the volume's a little less now. Agents saying, well, I'm just not going to show homes if they're not offering compensation up front to my buyers. Well, you don't know what conversation the seller and their listing agent were in, and they could have easily said, let's just put it on the market and see what people ask for. And in that regard, you're actually at a great advantage working with your buyer if you're like, I'm going to show you everything and we're going to ask for what you need. Because if you're competing in a market and other agents are not showing those homes and aren't writing offers on those homes, you may be in a better position.
And the other side of that is the principle number 4 is let the market work, because you think these are all marketing anyways, so they're not guaranteed. Let the seller look at the offers as they all stack up. They're going to have different things. There will be different prices offered. There's going to be different concessions requested. It's like let it work.
Let it work. Yeah, let the buyers and sellers meet with the offer. Let them meet with here's what the price I'm going to pay. Here's what concessions I need in order to do this transaction, and let the buyer and the seller work it out. And so those two principles really do tie well together. The middle two are really, you have to educate the consumer about how this works now. You have to present your value proposition on both sides and say, here's what we're doing for the work we're getting. So those are the operating principles that we present in the chapter. And then we've got some dialogues. Those of you that have been on sessions with me before know, we started presenting dialogues and having these conversations about how to handle different situations with buyers and sellers. So this is some blocking and tackling in language with how to talk about it. This one is offering seller concessions. We don't, in the new way, you don't say, hey, we recommend you offer buyers agents compensation so they'll show the house. If you don't offer compensation, people won't show your home to prospective buyers. You can dump that language. You don't need it anymore, and move over something that's more accurate and true, which is every buyer that's working with a realtor is required to sign an agreement. They're obligated to pay their realtor. And if you offer seller concessions, you're making your home more affordable to people.
What I love about these, Jack, I think there's like 10 dialogues here, and they weave in specifically into practice the principles we lay out earlier in the chapter. So you can almost see, oh, I see this in practice. And I don't know, when I've seen them, they're just great. Like as a set, you're like, okay, your mind starts, this is how you can move to the new way, and why you read them, you're like, oh, I should do this. It makes sense.
Yeah. All of the you'll notice the principles, and also I'd say things that we move people to are what I refer to as fact-based. They are fact-based. They're not scare tactic based. They're not, they're fact-based, and they put your consumer in a place of more knowledge to make a good decision. This one's a good example. This is compensation in the buyer agreement. So this is, somebody, and this one's coming up a lot on Facebook right now. I've been on a bunch of different agent groups, and people are asking and debating and over again, hey, I see the seller's offering more. Can I go back to my buyer and sign for more? Short version, no, don't do that, because you're going to run afoul of lots of different things by doing that. This says, hey, I'd like to sign a new buyer agreement. Don't do that so I can get more of that compensation. Hey, the seller's offering more concessions than my fee. How do you want to use it? Guys, we got to get our agents thinking long term. As an agent, you got to think longer term and say, I want a client that feels like I respected the agreement I made with them to do the work at a fixed price. I've got some contractors in my house. Maybe you guys can hear them. They're not coming in here asking me for more money because they, can get something better done. They're coming in saying, I'm going to do the work for the amount I quoted you, right? And that's really the perspective we need to have. That's how that works. Sellers and the listing agent fee. So this is being very clear about not trying to build in the other agent's compensation into your fee and saying,
Don't read
hey,
minds.
don't read minds. Don't try to build in that fee and say, well, I know what the buyer agent needs to get paid, and I'm going to charge you, I'm going to get you commit to that up front. It says, look, you're just going to pay me. We're going to find out what the buyer needs based on what they're paying their agent. So that's a free market over there. We let the free market work, and that works out in your favor as a seller. If they come in and say, hey, here's what I need in order to do this transaction, then we know. We're not guessing. I like this one. This is to talk about you're working in a market where you do have brokers that are continuing the old way and they're asking for 2x versus you're saying, hey, X for me and whatever it is that the buyer asked for, which could be less than X, could be Y. This is just to say, look, be careful about working with an agent that insists you pay them more so they can share it with a cooperating agent. We don't know what that cooperating agent is asking for or what fee that they've agreed to with their buyer. Let's find out. So that's a good one to use in that situation. And then this one's the last one we've got for you guys on this call. This is just a taste. We've got more dialogues in the chapter for you. This is to talk about what to offer. So we need to get away from the language on the left. The standard in our market is X. There is no standard. That's not how this works. Everything in real estate is negotiable. But you can say we use comparable sales. When sellers sell with our firm, we've looked at that over time, and here's what they end up paying in concessions in order to make the transaction happen. Or their total our fee plus any concessions they pay tends to be Y%, whatever that percent is. And by the way, brokers, this is an area where you need to keep your own stats based on your own deals because you may do a better job. This is an area of competitive where you can be actually competitive with just knowing your own statistics. So instead of quoting blanket, like, well, this is what people typically do in our market, blah, 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 very wavy and not firm, not database. Go database. Be based on what you have in your accounting system. How much those transactions, what was in them, so you need to track them. So
It's some
those
extra
are
work, but this
yeah,
is a step that I think will help, as you suggest, Jack. It's that clarity gives consumers
yeah.
more confidence and clarity for themselves too.
Yeah, so I'd say for trend one, if you are looking for a guidebook on how to handle the trend, what to do, this first chapter that Paul put together on this trend has all the best thinking we were able to put together in one section.
And Jack, I was just reading through it today again, and it's just like I would just think you just sit and like look at it, pour through it, and decide how to implement it, how to train agents, and if you're an agent yourself, how to adopt some of these practices. It's just it's pretty comprehensive in that way.
Yeah. And we have some consulting work that goes with this. If you read through the chapter and say, I want to get some help doing this, our team is working with a lot of brokers on moving their entire infrastructure, training, forms, policy and procedures, all of that over to the new way. The second part we wanted to talk about today is what else is coming. So I don't know, Paul, sounds like you've reviewed
Yes.
this. So talk to
Yeah.
us about what else is coming on the legal litigative regulatory
Well,
front.
there's a lot still here, as we know. The DOJ has its fingers in a couple of areas related to the industry developments, and then of course there's a clear cooperation policy, and then there's the buy side litigation that's the buy side compensation lawsuits that are still pending, and then there's the issue of forms, and we'll go through. We have some slides on these. I think you have that one that was the exhibit in the trial, Jack. I think that might be a good one to pull up.
Yeah,
We
I
can
sure
start
do. I sure do. Yeah.
because this relates to one in the chapter. We provide kind of some foundational baseline information about the DOJ's history in the industry. It's really helpful for context, and also we provide some T3 commentary on the DOJ's statement of interest in
Mm,
the MLS pin and no select case. This is the clearest. It's like 38 pages, Jackie. When you read it, the clearest elucidation of what the DOJ is actually looking for, and their
yep.
primary concerns are steering, and it comes out very clearly in that statement, in that commentary, steering and price listing. This is what they're concerned about. They even
Yep.
referenced this chart that was in the
Yep.
trial, the Burnett trial, to elucidate their point.
Yeah.
This
Yeah,
is
so this is a chart. This chart was used in Sitzer Burnett. It was presented by the plaintiffs to demonstrate that, this was the plaintiffs saying, this is not me saying it, this is not Paul saying it, it's not T3 saying it, but the plaintiffs took this chart and said, look, they fixed the price. If 94% of transactions are at 3%, then that means there must have been
the
some
buy side compensation
the
for
buy
6
side
years,
compensation. There's
7
been
years
yeah,
between
there's been
Heartland and MLS.
collusion within the industry to fix the price at 3%, and that, ergo, this is an antitrust violation. So that's why we included this in the chapter and talked about it. And what DOJ wants to see is they want to see, and not just DOJ anymore. People go, well, we're going to have a Trump administration, all that's going to change. Maybe. The problem is we now have a settlement where this has been alleged and convicted, and NAR lost, did not appeal, chose to settled on the principle of that the buyer and the buyer's agent negotiate their compensation agreement as an upfront requirement to showing property. And so what DOJ wants to see, and by the way, plaintiffs will keep suing this industry if they don't see, is that buyers and their agents actually work out compensation up front, and that there's no funny business. So this is one where if there's funny business, we're going to get in trouble. If there's funny business, the brokers are going to get in trouble. I think in this chapter, Paul, you also wrote about the challenge with forms
Yes.
So I'll present. I've discussed this on stage a number of times, but I'll say this again. So if we lost an antitrust case on the basis that collusion was happening in the MLS, we use the MLS as the collusive mechanism. And now we move that. Now they're going to say, look, you guys are still getting the same percentages. So the outcomes are still the same. And the forms principally concentrate on broker to broker offers of compensation, where there's not really a free market for buyer agent services, where the listing agent sets the value of the buyer agent service, not the buyer.
And Jack, who makes the forms?
The associations make the forms, right? Committees of brokers get together and make those forms. So the point in this trend number 2 is we got to watch out how the forms are being created. Many national brokerages have made their own forms. Some local brokerages are making their own forms that focus, instead of that broker offer compensation, making it a seller concession, and allowing the buyer and the buyer agent to actually have a free and fair market and negotiate it out.
Jack, it's almost this chapter clarifies why you want to use the strategies in chapter 1. Essentially,
yeah.
It's like it removes the risk, it gives you the clarity, and as we know, the DOJ, who knows what's going to happen with the Trump administration, how that may change. But right now, the NAR has petitioned the Supreme Court because the DOJ has been investigating specifically the compensation policies still, and the clear cooperation policy, and a number of other things explicitly. And now it's in the Supreme Court's hand. And so that's early 2025. So this is just some of the information you can see. It's like there's stuff that's pending. Same thing with the buy side lawsuits. Like that could go to trial in 2026. I mean, there's things pending here.
Yeah, and these are some foundational things. I think everybody that has worked in this industry is used to, we use the forms the association provides us, we use the MLS, and we follow whatever the MLS rules are. And that second one has just changed because of these lawsuits. And the forms, as we've seen, DOJ has been willing to intervene in California and say, hey, we don't like that your forms are still doing broker to broker.
And 2 other associations that we don't know specifically, the DOJ has been involved in investigating them. And they're looking. They're actively investigating this.
Yeah, and further, that there continue to be all of this sets a precedent for lawsuits to continue to be filed. Because think about this: if you are a plaintiff and you worked with a selling broker, and they said, oh, you need to offer some compensation up front, and you're going to sign it in your listing agreement, then you have, if you look at the grounds for the original settlement and for the first court case, you may have grounds to sue, and you may decide to sue on that basis and say, hey, I was told I couldn't sell my home unless I offered X% up front. And I think you're on shaky ground. So that's part of the justification of moving to the new model, which the new model is clean, it's easier, and it's very clear the separation. We're not trying to influence the buyer side cost for services.
So you can just get to a couple steps ahead and reduce risk
Yeah.
and like operate with more clarity with on a sound footing.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk before we move on real quickly about clear cooperation. So you put a summary of clear cooperation in there. Obviously,
Yeah.
CCP has been a lot in the media. Talk to us a little bit about what your findings were, what the chapter says about CCP.
It's a big deal. There's points of contention around these, and essentially what it comes down to is whether you view the MLS as a listing marketplace or an open broker, a place where brokers can go and share the broad base of listings. Right. And that's where the point of contention comes out of what is it? And there's arguments on both sides. Potentially both of them are valid, but there's pros and cons on both sides. Like, does the seller have rights? Because they're in some cases it could be their listing, if it has days on market, it gets a little of a perception of like, oh, this is not a desirable property. Or if the buyers, there's a similar case on the buy side. And also, as we know, if you have more market share and if you have office exclusives, if that becomes more of a thing, then broker competition goes down and then the fragmenting of the marketplace emerges. And then the MLS as we know it, which has been a really foundational piece of the market, the US industry, could potentially change. So this is a big topic that with a lot of tentacles, as we all know. Like we're all thinking about it and watching it. The news is coming, and it's a big deal.
Yeah, I liked what you did in that chapter with contrasting the two different points of view. We really are, when you wrote the report, and then we actually in putting together the opportunity report as well, that we found that like right now we're at a moment in time where leaders are deciding about what's more important. Is the transparent marketplace, the accessibility of the listings for the consumer, the accessibility of listing data, is that a higher priority? Or is the ability of the seller to control how they want their property marketed, and whether or not there's an exchange with that exclusive representation agreement, if that exclusive representation agreement actually means anything, right?
To the point of the chapter, the DOJ is actively potentially investigating this, depending on with the Supreme Court how it rules, whether it decides to hear the case and what decides. And there's a couple of lawsuits pending too related to the CCP. So there's, once again, just like compensation, there's both of those pressures are hitting this topic, this thread in the industry, which is kind of interesting. And it's a big one. It's probably one of the biggest ones heading into the new year.
What I would say is, if you've listened to this or if you've been following us before and you want to know what to do in 2025, then these two chapters are critical for planning your strategy for 2025. These are the two most important trends: what's happening, with the settlement and post-settlement practices, and what's coming. Critical to read these and to understand them so that you can decide how you want to address them in your brokerage and in your personal practice.
And we should say, Jack, we kind of designed this for leadership meetings, and there's bulk purchasing and also some special packages for presentations. And this is really meant to be a strategic tool. It's written, designed, analyzed, presented in that way. And it really becomes really useful in a group setting, especially with some peers or on your leadership team. And so this is, to your point, Jack, this is an invaluable resource. And I'm really happy with the way it came out. I think it's going to be really useful and to the leaders who are able to get it. So it's at t3trends.com, available now digitally, ships in early December.
Yeah, our only questions that have come in are purchasing questions. I like that. So yeah, t3trends.com, go there. We do have a bulk purchase option available. If you're ordering more than 25 copies for your board or your company, you can email us and we can put it on an invoice, so it's a little easier if you don't want to go through the credit card purchasing process. I'll also say that we are pre-booking talks and speaking engagements about this with our team. So if you want somebody to come in and present to your board or your company about this, that's an additional option. Again, just reach out to us about that. I think Chris Riley is handling those. It's Chris at T360.com. I think, Chris, you can post something into the chat about that. If people are doing, if you want to do a bulk order, or you have questions about consulting work in conjunction with this, Chris can get you connected to the right people for that kind of work. And important resource, get it in your hands. Lots to do next year. I would be remiss not to mention, we did release a free report about 3 weeks ago at theopportunityreport.com. Definitely go get that one. That is we interviewed some of the smartest top 50 leaders in the country about where they think the industry is going the next 4 to 5 years. That is free. It's about 100 pages. Go pick up a copy. Paul did a ton of work on that, as did the rest of the team. That's a really strong resource to go in conjunction with the Trends Report, which has more, we think, a little bit more tactical what to do in 2025 and 2026. So I think those two things together, very strong. Chris, can you post in the opportunityreport.com into there? It'll take you to our downloads page for the free report. So let me just type it in while Chris is handling. We got a bunch of people asked. Opportunityreport.com will get you there. I think that's spelled right. There you go. Yeah, the opportunityreport.com. Definitely go get that. You're welcome. So we get that report, pre-order the T3 Trends Report. When is this shipping, Paul? When will people get their physical print reports?
It's shipping in the first week of December. They should start arriving toward the latter part of that week and into the next week. And yeah, so that's the timing now. Excited to get it in people's hands. It's really a valuable in print. That's why we sell it as a combination. Everybody purchases, get a print copy. It's a really useful resource throughout the year.
It's great. Great. All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming out. We'll do this again. We're going to be doing some additional highlights out of the report in the coming months. And then in January, we obviously have the release of the first chapter of the Real Estate Almanac and our ranking reports that come out January through May. And we look forward to those. Paul, I know those are already in process. So
yes.
Looking forward to that. And then Chris, if you could post in thank you, Chris. He's posting in the link to get that. So thanks again for turning out. Love seeing all the interaction that we're getting in the chat, and happy to help answer any questions that you may have about the report. We'll be looking for that on future webinars as well. So thanks so much.
Thanks.
Take care, Paul.
You too, Jack.